honored to be here on behalf of the Soto Zen International Center. And I thank you personally also for calling us to check on how we're doing here in Houston. That meant a lot to us. Thank you so much. And we're all in this together. I know that everybody in Hawaii and your temples also are suffering from the pandemic. And I know Hawaii has been very hard hit. And I know you've managed to maintain a limited number of cases of COVID-19, but many people have died. So I'm very sorry. And I know the economy has been really hard hit in Hawaii. So it's sad in Hawaii and also in Texas how many people have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So we're all in this together. We all have to support each other. So thank you very much for inviting me. And I want to say hi to the other ministers and members of the Hawaii Soto Zen Mission for now. And many of you I met at our last joint meeting. So it's really good to see your faces again. And just to say a tiny bit about what happened in Houston, because this is the world we're all entering into, but the weather that we had prepared for, which is basically subtropical, our city can handle some subtropical weather, but it wasn't built for the kind of cold that we had. So we had try to imagine this, you wonderful Hawaii people, we had several days of 14-degree weather. And we're just not built for that. So the electric system basically froze and we had to reach out to each other and share water because in our big city, the freezing of the electric system meant that the pumps shut down, so there was no running water. So we had to share water and use our emergency supplies and boil water. And while I was listening to Bishop Komagata just now, one of those emergency warnings came on the computer that said, the order to boil water has now been lifted, so we can now use our water. So thank you. I attribute that to your powers, Bishop. Thank you for lifting the water. And the way we learn how to take care of each other because of the pandemic, we all want to be together in person. We just want to be together in our temples. And even here in Houston, we can't be in our temple. I'm over in a different room because the reception is better, but we've learned how to reach out to each other, and all the people who don't want to text have learned how to receive text messages. So we were able to check on everyone during this latest crisis. So everything that we're learning, we put to immediate use. We learned how to text, we're doing Zoom, so we're all reaching out to figure out how to help each other. But today I'm here to talk about the work of the United Nations and these sustainable development goals that our Soto Zen school has officially aligned with. So Soto Zen headquarters has aligned with these 17 development goals, or SDGs. And so I have some questions I'd just like to organize it around. What are they? How are they different from what we're already doing, especially in Hawaii, which already lives so close to nature? What does it have to do with Soto Zen Buddhism? And finally, what are the next steps for us as human beings and as Buddhists to align ourselves with these sustainable development goals? And I looked at the website. So your website already states, in essence, the goal. It says, our mission is to promote the happiness and general welfare of our members and the community by promoting the spiritual beliefs of Soto Zen Buddhism and raising awareness of charitable and beneficial works. So if we just change the word community maybe to the world, basically we're already aligned with the goals. Our mission is to promote the happiness and general welfare of our members and the entire world by promoting the spiritual beliefs of Soto Zen Buddhism and raising awareness of charitable and beneficial works. That's what we already want to do. So what are these sustainable development goals? They arose from the work of the United Nations in about 2012. And they worked for 2 years, just going and talking in all countries, gathering opinions, meeting with individuals and all sorts of nonprofit groups, but also people who aren't usually included in decision making, people who are left out of official decisions. And so they developed the vision. Their vision statement is, all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, a world where economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. So it's really ambitious. We say supremely ambitious, and it's a transformational vision. And the 17 individual goals, and then within the goals, there are 169 targets, are part of a vision, and this is from their writing. The vision of the world in which every country enjoys sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and decent work for all. A world in which consumption and production patterns and use of all natural resources are sustainable. One in which humanity lives in harmony with nature and in which wildlife and other living species are protected. So that's the overall vision. And the Soto Zen headquarters officially aligned with this and made an expedition to the United Nations headquarters and presented a letter acknowledging our support, because they're already in alignment with the vision of Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching of total interdependence, as well as the vows of compassion of Kannon Bodhisattva. This is already our goal. And so in order for us to reach these goals, we know everyone will have to overcome the sense of division and act in our own way toward the common good. So it's just simply true that we all have to work together and all of our individual efforts have to join. And even in these crises, it feels like it can turn our attention inward. I even realized this morning that I had paid a lot of attention to our Houston Zen group, our membership, our auspicious cloud temple, Shounji, and I hadn't checked in with the other big Buddhist groups in Houston because it took a lot of energy to keep up with our members. And then this morning, I realized I haven't checked in with Jade Buddha Temple, Chan temples, and so I'll do that later today. So for us as Buddhists, it's not difficult to see that working together is always the way forward. We also know that work, action, is our existence itself. Buddhism is a religion of action. The introduction of one of Dogen Zenji's writings called Gyobutsu Yuji, the dignified presence of active Buddhas, says, Buddhism esteems action very highly because action is our existence itself, and without acting, we have no existence. So Buddha's historical mission was to find the truth of action, the truth of karma. So Buddhas in action act with dignified presence. The Sustainable Development Goals have 5 parts: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And the goals were updated in 2015, with a goal of realizing great progress by 2030. And now I'm just going to, let's see, Reverend Hata, I can share my screen. I will share. Okay. Sorry, my screen is all full, but there it is. I will enlarge this. So the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them are: Goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Goal 2, end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Goal 5, excuse me. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Goal 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Goal 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Goal 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Goal 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Goal 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Goal 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Goal 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So the Sustainable Development Goal, the plan, recognizes that there are different approaches, visions, models, and tools in every country, every temple, and the strength will come from all of us using our unique vision and our special strengths. So that's the first question. What are the SDGs? The second is, how are the SDGs different from what we are already doing, especially in Hawaii, which is already so close to nature and so close to sustainability? So the goals are not that different from our local concerns, but they are meant to encompass the entire globe. While all of the goals are global, some are closer to home. So goal 14, to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, is the major emphasis this year for the United Nations. Actually, they're calling it the Decade of the Oceans. So this year is the beginning of the Decade of Ocean Science, which will help define pathways for sustainable development. The ocean is our planet's largest ecosystem. It stabilizes climate, stores carbon, nurtures unimaginable biodiversity, and directly supports human well-being through food and energy resources, as well as by providing cultural and recreational services. I know one of the joys of being in Hawaii as a visitor when I visit is closeness with the ocean. So just the power and strength of being close to the ocean is so rare and fortunate. And I hope that it opens back up and more people can visit again soon. So unfortunately, despite improved management and conservation actions, the United Nations First World Ocean Assessment found that much of the ocean is now seriously degraded. As the world population will reach an estimated 9 billion people by 2050, impacts on the ocean associated with human activities will increase. Action can only be effective if it is based on sound knowledge informed by science. There is an increasing need to find scientific solutions that allow us to understand the changes taking place in our ocean and to reverse its declining health. Ocean science has made great progress over the last century in exploring, describing, understanding, and enhancing our ability to predict changes in the ocean system. And of course, we want to support scientific research, and we also know that we are karmically linked through all our actions. And again, in your February newsletter, the February newsletter of Hawaii Soto Zen Mission describes that there are numerous ways to support the Green Plan by conserving water and recognizing that water is the source of life. Dogen Zenji, as you say in your newsletter, when he drew a dipper of water from a mountain stream, kept only half and poured the second half back into the stream. Water is precious. Our life comes from water. All life comes from the ocean. All of our individual efforts can be linked directly to these sustainable development goals when we dedicate our activities. Conserving water, being mindful of fuel and energy, caring for the young, caring for the old, all these efforts we are already making are part of the 17 SDGs. The Soto Zen school, the Soto Zen Buddhism school is also emphasizing goal number 5, achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. This means, among other things, bringing the work of women in our communities forward and recognizing how important all the women and girls are, and clearing the way for them to progress. So the third question is, what does the program of the SDGs have to do with Soto Zen Buddhism? Shakyamuni Buddha opened his eyes to the truth of reality. The Buddha treasure gives us the living example of an active Buddha who started teaching from the moment of his awakening. And through his living example, we see that he consistently demonstrated that there are no real distinctions between people. There are no castes, no high, no low. All such distinctions are dreams or illusions. Buddha showed that there is no need to turn away from people with different opinions or strong views. All people are included. All are welcome. Kannon Bodhisattva demonstrated with her 1,000 hands and eyes that she can respond to the unique needs of all individuals. And second, the Dharma treasure gives us the groundwork of understanding how all the actions and attitudes of the past have led us to this moment. It also shows us that by changing even a slight amount, we begin to alter the course of our own history as well as the history of the world. Sometimes Buddha has been called a great scientist because of his clear-sighted investigation of cause and effect. And in fact, Buddhism appeals to scientists who are themselves looking for the real nature of events. Just as the Buddha remained open to all people, whether they agreed with him or not, the Dharma teaches a clear-eyed investigation of cause and effect. When we look clearly, we see the urgency of our situation in the world. The Sangha treasure provides the connections and support to look deeply and understand the work ahead, while also strengthening us in our connections. We are not alone in this effort. None of us is alone, because we are in a Sangha of beings who are making efforts to understand, to atone, and to act to remedy our situation. Shakyamuni Buddha awakened and realized that many of us are still sleeping. How to address this problem? So living here in Houston with our recent climate emergency, when we had no running water, we realized we had to break through and look at the roots of the problem. We had to break through and learn how to share. So here in Houston, where we live in subtropical conditions, we take water for granted. We aren't careful about water. Even I have gotten kind of lazy here about letting the water run. But this situation reminded us how precious the water is. So we woke up to the reality that's coming for all of us, to realize the preciousness of water, to realize the preciousness of all the resources. They are not unlimited. In Houston, it felt as if the people here, all of us, are in the burning house of the Lotus Sutra. Though the house is on fire, we ignore the danger and continue to feel secure. But here in Houston, we are continuing to work toward climate justice, as well as caring for those who are less fortunate in our community. The UN resolutions ask us to turn our attention to those who are most at risk with the least resources to recover or to understand the situation of the world at large. Here in the US, where we consume far more resources than all other countries, we are all living in a burning house, and it takes great effort on our part to remain aware of the greater world. I know that all of you who are at this gathering have made that effort and will continue to make that effort. But I also know that I have experienced our culture here as trying to mask the reality of our situation on this continent and on this planet. We still have a choice whether to pay attention or not, to act or not, to investigate or not. This willingness to see clearly is part of the fundamental teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. However we choose to act, it is still based on our desire to see clearly, like scientists, but with the compassion of Kannon. If we listen carefully, as I know all of you are doing, we hear the cries of the world itself and the cries of the most helpless. Just as Kannon, the great bodhisattva, hears all the cries of the world, including the cries of those who are too weak to cry out. She hears those cries and she responds. We also, together in strength as a Sangha, can turn our ears, our hearts, our investigation to those cries. The United Nations document addresses this by focusing our attention on those who are in danger of being left behind. Now, in that document, the UN tries to turn our attention to those who are in danger of being left behind because their choices are limited, and they're limited by 5 important factors: living in extreme poverty, being subject to discrimination, living in vulnerable geographical locations, living under ineffective or unjust governance, and living in the immediate path of climate change. Under such conditions, people have limited or no choice about action to address their situation. The last question is, what are the next steps for us as human beings and as Buddhists? What can we do? Soto Zen headquarters has taken the important step of formally aligning our organization with the UN. So the letters were written and presented, and after careful deliberation, a program of education has begun, and we are trying to begin the process of informing everyone, which is what we're doing right now. The next steps are where the creativity will come in. How will each of our regions address the issues in the 17 SDGs? Which ones will resonate in your temple? Are there big actions we can take, or should we start immediately with small actions and see where it develops from there? For example, the work that is described in your February newsletter could become part of the work toward greater climate awareness. That could be officially aligned and attached to a resolution to support the SDGs. And here's a story in the document, Leave No One Behind, that Reverend Hatta is going to share with you. This is from Rio de Janeiro. A young man in Brazil writes, and this is a young man who lives in one of the very large ghettos, impoverished districts in Brazil. He says, once I saw in the newspaper a story that said that the dirtiest community of Rio de Janeiro was mine. That was when I dropped everything and went to work with recycling. I faced all kinds of difficulties. People criticized me, and drug dealers wanted to take my land. I still continued and gathered all the cans, bottles, plastic bags, and cooking oil that was just tossed on the ground. History is made by those who move on. He says, if I can change a person, I can also change the world. He started by cleaning his one corner of the world. So in Japan and the US and other developed countries, many of us have more choice. We always have choices in our thinking and investigation, and many of us have powerful choices in how we choose to act and where we choose to place our effort. We are not helpless, we are Sangha. In our own communities, we can turn our gaze and learn to recognize the forms of poverty and disempowerment that surround us, even in our own communities. It looks different in wealthy countries like Japan and the US, but it is there. Poverty, isolation, loneliness. So let us all look with clear eyes at who is included and who is left out of the decision making. Taking these steps won't be comfortable, but it will be real. We'll be standing in the fierce flames with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We'll be standing in the flames of our world, greed, hate, and delusion. But we're standing with the Buddhas and with each other. And there, when we're together, we can stand with equanimity and send encouragement to everyone. thank you very much for your time. And now, if you'd like to discuss or have questions, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Konjin. Uh, I wanted to ask if there are any questions amongst those who have been listening to the video, to your presentation.
I have a question. Where did she go? Reverend Godwin, in where you live in Texas is a really Republican neighborhood. And they're anti-socialistic. And what you talked about is really socialistic. Um, how are you to influence those kind of people?
Slowly and carefully.
I know. I mean, they're very aggressive as well, too.
Well, if we set aside any assumptions about what people are going to believe and just say, hello, how are you today, then we open up a channel for dialogue, and we find things that we share in common. And people in Texas, they do like the countryside. They like land. So we can start on something that we share concern for, and then try to sort of stay away from the issues that are going to inflame the passions. But I have to say, Eric, that the big cities like Texas, Houston, which is a pretty big city, tend to be, as you say, more socialistic.
Oh,
So
really?
when people and when people live together in groups that are very diverse, Houston is a very, very diverse city. And in one neighborhood, one of our members teaches in a school where 83 languages are spoken. Very diverse. And so the more different people live together, the more it expands their understanding, changes their perspective. The real problem in Texas are the outermost communities, which are predominantly white and predominantly Republican, and they tend to try to maintain a way of life, which is a fantasy. But the cities tend to be all the big cities are Democratic, run by Democratic governors. That usually surprises people.
Yeah, it does me myself. Because as we talk about homelessness as well,
Yeah.
I think because of a socialistic philosophy, I think some of them are like just lazy, just don't want to get out of it because there's so much contribution involved. Um, that's another mindset on the opposite end, and it's a problem for not only the world, it's ourselves. But
Well, we do have a large homeless population here, and one of our members is the director of the biggest homeless program. So they provide job training, daycare, and things like that. Homeless people are very welcome. And the stories of how people become homeless are very moving. And it's not like one man, and our member who's been working with homeless people for decades, she still cries when she talks about the people, because one man had a brain tumor and surgery, and the cost of his medical bills completely took all of his savings. And then his wife had a job which she lost. They couldn't make, because all of their savings were gone, and he couldn't get a job anymore because of his frailty. Gradually, they used up their savings, and he became homeless. And he's such a sweet man, but he isn't quite as coherent as he used to be. And he would love to have a job, but it's hard for him to get it together. And most homeless people that we hear about and met have this calamitous accumulation of circumstances that they can't come over, and our society is so unforgiving. So
you're right.
yeah. Our society expects people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And that's been a kind of a running joke here in Texas. It's like they want us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Where are the bootstraps? So that's kind of a joke. They took the bootstraps away. They froze and broke off. So I hear you. How to motivate people to stay involved in society is a big challenge for us, because once they get left behind, they're in danger of falling further behind. And how do we stay in connection? Thank you for your question.
Okay, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Can I have another question? And make sure that you're unmuted when you speak, or else we can't hear you.
Komagata Sensei, are you in a car?
Yes, we have a taiko practice here at our temple, and it's too noisy if I sit in my office, so I have to jump in the car.
We're finding creative ways.
Yes.
I have a comment.
Les.
This is Les. Yeah. I guess you can turn, this global crisis into a political question. Obviously, Houston, you're talking about all that, Texas, right? And Senator Cruz and whatever else is happening. I've been following all this stuff because it's so interesting about Trump and the impeachment and whatnot, and
Yeah.
the new Biden administration. But I guess as an individual, I guess it just goes back to, maybe even the Buddha, right? By example, because it's really, I mean, you can work through the political thing, work through representative voting and electioneering and campaigning. But I think the only thing really on a personal level you can do day to day is really by example. I guess whether you uh, donate specifically to a group or to someone on the street or whatever, the homeless. I think that's the only way you can do it in a real positive way. Because if you just throw up your hands, well, what can you do against the Republicans? Then it becomes so political and becomes so stressed out. So I think probably that's, I don't know. It's not a solution, but it's a continuing way that you can practice.
Yeah, thank you, Les. That is the most important thing. It's that we have the power to make choices on our behavior, and then we decide this behavior is significant. Every action that you take is very significant. And some of them are visible, like people will be encouraged if we're walking down the street and we see trash and we pick it up and just put it in the trash can. People are encouraged if they see that, perhaps. But even if they don't see it, it's encouraging. All of our actions, visible or invisible, are transforming the self and then transforming the world. And they just set up a resonance with the world. So it's very important to start with small actions, because what karma is the accumulation of small actions. Small, millions and millions of small actions accumulate and cause a change, cause a transformation. And we don't know what combination of factors is going to, wake up all the states, all the countries. But we do know that every individual action has a profound impact. That's the teaching of the Buddha. And that's the teaching of Dogen Zenji also, because in Dogen Zenji taught that this time that he was living in is the same as our time. All time, this moment contains the past and the future. This moment is it. And Dogen Zenji's time was a time of great civil unrest and warfare and sickness and difficulty. And yet we have his insight, which is that all of it is the manifestation of Buddha nature. So for us to be able to use our teachings to find peace in our hearts, is what's going to enable the rest of the world to see that there is a possibility of having peace in the human heart, peace and compassion and generosity. The teachings of Soto Zen are so important in our world today. So it may feel small, but that's just the small mind is deciding that that action is small. Buddha mind knows how big that action is.
Reverend Konjin, wanted to ask you this question. Since Sotoshu, or actually more specifically, since you've become involved with the SDGs and Sotos and Buddhism, this relationship, what kind of progress have you seen firsthand, whether it's through your involvement maybe in Houston or just watching the news? What kind of positive progress has been made to give us some hope that these sustainable development goals are actually attainable?
Yeah, thank you, Komagata Sensei, Shuji-sama. I have seen evidence, and at first, when we first started hearing about it, I think the first time I ever heard it said out loud was probably from Taiga Ito from our office, and Koyu-san is here from the international office. So the first time I heard about it was from our Soto Zen school. And then I started paying more attention, and I see evidence of it everywhere. In fact, there's another college here in Houston that had a contest recently for the best proposal for an educational conference on SDGs. And so there are a bunch of proposals by the college students, and then they selected the winner. So now they're going to arrange a conference. A big part of what we have to do is spread the word. A big part of what we have to do is give people hope that there's a container for all of this work. So we're not just doing individual activities. There's a container, there's something we can tag onto, which will then increase the momentum of our individual efforts. So that's one. And then I heard about it again from one of our members actually works in Tokyo. He's lived there now for about 6 years, and he's an ocean scientist. So he's doing on the seafloor of the Japan Sea, he's doing research. He's mostly not on the seafloor, but the research is down there. They send down big probes. And they are all very aware of that this is the decade of ocean science. So all the scientists who have devoted their lives to studying the ocean feel encouraged, because that's on the list of the United Nations, and they know that their work will contribute. So I think that the encouragement I'm feeling is the linking as people link up. And that's why when I just looked at your website a couple of days ago to see what was happening, and there they were, the green program. And once you know that that's part of the whole SDGs, I think that it can kind of put the burner up under our activities. When everything that we're doing is part of it. And then I haven't asked our temple here yet to come up with a program. I've talked about the SDGs a lot, but I think the next step for us will be to say, okay, what is it that we actively want to do to align ourselves with this? That'll be my next step. So, you'll start to see more references to it. And I guess to go back into the political realm just briefly, the last administration was so anti-UN that we didn't hear anything about the UN. Now maybe with this administration, which likes the UN, we'll hear more and more about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? We're going to be wrapping it up in a few minutes. Just wanted to maybe take one more question if there's anybody. If not, we're going to wrap it up. Okay.
Oh, may I ask a question? Reverend Konjin, this is Chico from Kona. Where can we find the 17 individual goals of the SDG? Is it posted somewhere is on the sotozen.net website?
Even better than that. And thank you, Jiko-san. It's so good to see you again. So good to see you.
Thank you so much.
I want to visit you in Hawaii next time.
Oh, please come on over. This is my daughter, Jikai.
Hi, Kai. Good to see you.
We'll be waiting for you.
Excellent. I will check it out. I know it's opening back up, so that's good. Well, Reverend Hatta has the two main documents. There's one which is called Transforming.
Oh, I see it now. It's posted in the chat.
Yes, I posted now.
Yeah, and this one, what does it mean to leave no one behind? He's attaching that to, it's a really good document, but the big one, which is like 30 pages, 35 pages or something, 41 pages, excuse me. This is it. It's the agenda. And it's just so beautiful. It's just, the writing is so almost poetic. And it just makes you want to find a way to connect. So you'll soon have that document.
Okay, thank you. I see it now in the chat box.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Reverend Konjin, and thank you everyone for joining in. It was definitely enlightening to hear how our Buddhist practice is so much aligned, even before you say we are officially adopting these SDGs, how just by the way Buddhism is, that it seems like a very natural and cohesive partnership. And before we go, I wanted to just ask Bishop Komagata to say a few words of thank you.
Oh, Reverend Konjin, thank you very much for sharing the teachings of the Buddha, and also about this SDG program. We certainly appreciate your participation, your guidance, and I hope we'll be able to see you in person next time. So please come over to Hawaii and give us not only words of encouragement, but if you can continue to share all the ideals of what we can do, maybe in a small way, but something that can grow and share with everyone globally. Thank you very much. どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you. I look forward to our next meeting, and I hope it's in person, but I really long to see your beautiful temple and see you all in person.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Konjin. Thank you everyone for joining, and please take care of yourselves.
Yes.
Thank you.
Take care.